I'd like to welcome everyone to the seminar tonight, put on by our very own Alison Strang and Denise Jacoby, judging the Nova Scotia duck tolling retriever. It's been a long time since Alison's done her seminar here in BC that I know of for
many years.
We more local folk and a number of you from away, I will say. So Alison Strang is a long-time breeder of duck tollers here in Canada. I think probably all of you are familiar with her name. She lives not very darn far from this very hotel.
That's right.
And don't know who the dog is in the picture, so I'm going to stop being distracted by it.
No, she's not identified, but most people would recognize that picture. Of course it's Bonnie.
Hey,
who else?
I'm the service here. What can I say? I apologize for not recognizing Bonnie.
No, why would you?
Without further ado, I will turn the microphone over to Alison first.
Yeah.
Denise first. Alison first.
Yeah.
So please welcome Alison and Denise tonight.
I would just like to say what a great pleasure it is to have you all here, and I'm particularly grateful to Denise, who only flew in this morning from Australia. You talk about down under, I think, she's sure which way is up yet. So let's just get on with this. This was actually mainly written for judges, but today it's really more like a slightly in-depth discussion of the Toller standard for you. So we'll just carry on with that. I would like to say to all of you that never please lose sight of what this dog was bred to do, which was tolling or luring ducks within gunshot range with its extremely animated retrieving style. The retrieving part actually was introduced into the dog later. So we do need to remember this, that this is not just another of the retrievers. This is a very special retriever. So I'm sure you all agree with me on that. But so we'll just get started here. I've split this up so that it's the probable origin. You can all read up there, breed characteristics, anatomy, and a review of the standard. Okay, Mary Ellen? There. I subscribe to the theory that this dog, the Toller, has at least the same roots as the small Dutch Kooikerhond, which in the Middle Ages was known as a piper dog, was bred to lure ducks into nets before guns, fowling pieces became common. And from there, it was probably taken to England, undoubtedly taken to England by Flemish engineers who went over to help drain the fen country in southeastern England. And a great expert on old dogs, Colonel David Hancock in England, is quite sure that there was a dog in England in the Middle Ages called a red decoy dog. And he's quite sure that this would be one of the ancestors of the Toller. It also was an ancestor of the Tweed Water Spaniel, which in turn was an ancestor of the Golden Retriever. So there you have it all coming full circle there. And I do believe this theory. We can't actually prove it, but it makes sense to me. Okay, Mary Ellen? And I believe it's very likely that some of these decoy-type dogs came with people from Brittany and Normandy who were among the earliest of the French settlers, came over with Cartier and later on with some of the others, and eventually settled in Nova Scotia in the what became famous or infamous as the Evangeline country. So this is, I believe, how this dog came to be in Canada. And then doubtless bred with other dogs that were in that area. There's a marked similarity between the Toller today and the Dutch Kooikerhond, which is Quaker meaning pipes, or it's actually would be more or less a Dutch equivalent of a piper dog. And they really are extremely similar. Nowadays, there's the odd one left, or odd decoy left. There's one in England. They are used to ban ducks for research purposes now. And when the early French settlers came and settled on, you see where it says Digby, and then around into the Minas Basin, that was the area that was settled by the Acadians, the French-speaking Acadians. And then, to our everlasting shame, were uprooted from there, and many went off and were sent down to Louisiana, which is where the term Cajun comes from now. But there were people who never left and who hid out in the woods and for a number of years. And I think it's quite possible that they had these little dogs with them, and certainly helped to keep them fed. It's all speculation, but I think that it's quite strong. Okay, Mary. Before we leave that, I think you might want to. I just got a few notes here about that these dogs were known up and down the east coast as far south as Chesapeake Bay, but they were originally known as just little dogs who lured the ducks in. They did not retrieve them. The retrieving was introduced later, and I myself believe it must be from the same origins as the Chesapeake Bay retriever. There is a distinct resemblance between Chesapeake puppies, Toller puppies, and so I think this is really how the evolution of the dog took place. I do not subscribe to the theory that Mr. James Allen in the 1870s bred a liver flat coat to a spaniel, and because the people around Yarmouth, which is the home of the Toller in Nova Scotia, they knew of these dogs long before the 1870s. And nowadays, this tolling as a method of hunting is dying out, but you still have to remember the origins of the dog and what it was bred for and why it has these playful actions, and certainly is quite different really from all the other retrievers in many aspects. Now, for the breed characteristics, you've got you've got this dog with a huge retrieving drive, but with that, he has to be sturdy, he has to be compact, he has to be powerful, and he has to be athletic. He's an absolutely tireless retriever, and he has some attributes of the same as the Border Collie. The Toller has an insatiable retrieving desire. The Border Collie has an insatiable herding desire. Tollers are, on the whole, not quite as intense as many Border Collies, but they're getting on that way.
Can I just interrupt there a moment, Alison?
Beg pardon?
Could I just make a point?
Yes.
To my mind, the Toller is a dog with a high work ethic, as is a Border Collie. The difference to me is that a Toller is a people-focused dog. It's a gun dog, it is a companion. And so when it works, it's insatiable. But it's
Want me to turn around this way?
Whereas the Border Collie, when he works, he just gets out there and works and works and works. So that's to me the difference between the two work ethics of those breeds.
But you do have some Tollers who are self-workers and not necessarily.
I'm not saying they don't show initiative, but they're very much a companion working with you.
They also do have their own strong idea of what they're supposed to do, and they can possibly resist. They can resist. Yeah, of course. Okay, now we all know the lively, the alert, the intelligent. You have to remember that I prepared this for judges who weren't all familiar with the breed as you people are. Okay. Now, we'll just start off with type here. I've got 4 good types. This was this dog was an influential sire in both North America and Scandinavia. He had good, strong bone, nicely balanced, beautiful proportions. He was a thoroughly nice dog, and he has left his mark on the breed.
Who was he?
Does it really matter? It's westerlies coast to coast. I mean, unless you know your taller pedigrees, these dogs are all from long way back, okay?
I know my taller.
I know you do, Sue. Yeah. Now, Denise will know this dog. This is a lovely bitch from Australia. I think she's an excellent type of the slightly shorter leg, deep-bodied type of Tola, which I would have to come right out and admit right now is my favorite kind. Her proportions look pretty correct to me. She's got a lovely neck, beautiful top line, great coat, beautiful head, nice feet. I don't know what isn't to like about this bitch. Okay.
She was taken 2 years of age and she was out of coat.
Nevertheless. Now here's a young dog
Taken at 2 years
who,
of age and she was out of coat.
this is a young dog in Norway. And his feet are in the snow, which makes him, he was a little short in the leg for my liking, but it makes him look even shorter because his feet are hidden. Beautiful type, lovely neck and top line, great expression, eyes a little bit light, lovely markings, good coat, gorgeous tail, gorgeous tail. To my mind, the tail is the Tola's crowning glory. And I love a good, that one's maybe slightly overly feathered. I do like them to be a bit on the bushy side, but this was a lovely dog. Alas, he's no longer with us either.
Note the insertion of the neck into the shoulder. Beautiful insertion of neck into shoulder.
Yes,
Flowing
well, that's the whole with the lovely neck and top line, yes.
The shoulder assembly has to be good in that dog. If it wasn't, that neck wouldn't exist in the way it does.
Right. Thank you, Denise. Now, this was a beautifully proportioned, balanced male, very strong bone, good color, lovely forechest on him, lovely white markings, beautiful tail, very strong dog. He was a big dog. And this dog brought in his limit of ducks one day and then went in and won an all-breed best in show the next day. And was a very influential sire, especially in Ontario, in the earlier days in Ontario.
How tall was he?
He was about 20.5 inches.
Oh, he was bigger than that.
Well, that's what I was told.
Bigger than that.
He was supposed to have been measured at that. I don't know. I never measured him.
Remember, it's at the wither.
But
where is the wither?
Judge.
Yeah, but where is the wither on that? Where is the wither on that dog? You see, he's very upset.
What is more is where is the highest point of the wither.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we won't, but he was a big dog. He had the most magnificent top line. You could have put a glass of water on that and it wouldn't have spilled. He was a wonderful, wonderful dog. So those are my 4 good types, and they're all a bit different from each other there. I like his proportion of leg to his length of body. So there you go. 4 good types. Now we go to Mary Ellen. What do we go to? No, I'm going to give you a very short anatomy lesson here, just if you don't really know your dog structure. And if you don't, please go and get a book or go on the internet or something and learn a bit about dog anatomy, especially if you have ambitions to breed. So we've got your front. When people talk about front angulation, it's the angle of the, yes, I'm doing that. Thank you, that's good. Yeah, of the humerus or the upper arm and the scapula or the shoulder blade. There we go. That is your front angulation. Now this dog, this this was a golden, of course. This was in Chris Zink's book, Jumping from A to Z. There's a lovely forechest there on this dog, and good angles. So if he didn't have that good forechest, his angles wouldn't be so good.
Placement of the shoulder on the chest is very important.
Yeah, yeah.
If that shoulder was placed a little bit further forward, then the dog would be slightly steeper.
Okay, now we're going to go back and match up pretty well the angles in the angle from the top of the pelvis through and down to the patella there, down the femur there. That's fairly much, it's not all exactly there. So you want front and rear angles that match.
The bottom two angles, if you take from the patella back to the heel bone.
Yeah, well then you
and
could
the
carry
forechest,
that on,
that
yes.
should be the same.
Now I have to say that we get very few tollers with lovely short hocks like that. We just don't.
So why is it that a dog that's steep in the shoulder doesn't look like they have any neck?
Because the shoulders are placed further forward on the chest, which brings the wither up. The neck is there, but the neck is
They have the same number of vertebrae.
Yes.
However, the
Yes.
wither is up high on the neck.
Yes.
Because the placement of the bearing in mind, the shoulder blade is attached to the rib cage by muscles. So if that's attached a little bit further on the same dog, same beautiful chest, but just goes in a tad, you see what happens with my hands? It goes slightly narrower, and in order to balance, it's got to come up a little bit like this.
So does the dog hold its head differently?
Generally speaking, more upright.
So
In extreme cases, with a very short upper arm and a forward-placed shoulder, you'll get a dog that is U-necked, very high.
and then would that affect the way their back is?
It depends how long the dog is.
It just
The length of
depends.
the rib cage
But
will
it's
make a difference.
definitely going to affect the front movement.
Yeah.
And in tollers, you get many, many tollers with a reasonably good shoulder layback, scapular, but that humerus or upper arm, instead of being like that, it's like this. And that is going to, and quite often with a shorter upper arm. And that gives that very choppy movement.
No, it is shorter.
You can feel it. You can feel it in puppies.
When you run your fingers down the shoulder blade, if you feel for the spine of the scapula, remember it's a plate like that and it has a spine. And if you feel that quite firmly, you can feel the length of that shoulder blade, then take your fingers back toward the elbow and you'll feel the length of this and the length of that, which is why judges go like this.
And they should match.
Yeah. Well, in
They
theory,
ideally, they
at
should be
time.
the same length. But
Yeah,
I mean,
but
I
that's
do
just
that
as
with
good.
puppies when I'm evaluating them, you know, to see, and you can see it in young puppies. So that's a bit of an anatomy for you, just to help you with you know, get to know these things. I don't want to dwell any more on that
No.
right now. Okay, Marianne? So now we sort of get to the breed standard when we break it down in just to this here. I'm not going to read them out. You can all read. So we'll go to the size and proportion one here. Okay, here's a total silhouette. And this silhouette is a great thing for you to train your eye on. And, okay, Marianne? The toller should be, and usually is, slightly longer than tall. And the emphasis on slightly. Believe you me, I've had some that are like freight trains, you know. So, but that is, and 10 to 9, I always have troubles with proportions, but I stuck that in there. In other words, it just should be slightly. Because if that's inches, then that's what you're saying is if it was 20 inches high, it would be, or 18 inches high, it would be 20 inches long, which, I mean, I don't think is right. But I don't
I
know.
would say 8 to 10. That's pretty well accepted as a balanced,
Yeah.
slightly
Yeah.
longer.
So,
Slightly off
and
square.
your average dog will have some kind of construction, something like this. Okay? Now, we have this thing about the level top line, and believe you me, there are some people that nitpick about a level top line, being absolutely level. But if you go back, Mary Ellen, could you go back to the skeleton? Now you look there, you see over the lumbar vertebrae, and just when at the top of the pelvis comes, there is a slight rise. It's generally over the end of the loin area. If it's further back, then that dog is high in the rear, and that is not good. But so it's not dead level, but it's pretty close.
Does your standard state a level top line?
It does say a level top line. I think maybe we should change that too. Yeah, because there is a bit of a difference. But you can feel, if you run your hand over a dog, you'll tend to find they're not absolutely.
And would there be an example of a breed that has a completely level top line, like maybe a Wheaton or something?
I don't think this is, I mean, this is a fairly generic skeleton. I know it was a golden, but you know, your gaze hounds have a different thing because they have a bit of a roach in their back.
It's actually,
and that's why it's supposed to be hinged.
The croup,
yeah,
which is
over the croup. Yeah,
from the hip bone down to where the tail comes off.
Yeah.
If you've got a long croup and tends to be sloping, and you've got a lower set tail, and most of the sighthounds particularly will have that longer croup. A flat coat retriever, if you're looking at the difference between a flat coat and a toller, a flat coat has a little more slope and a slightly longer croup proportion-wise to a toller, which is just slightly less, and the tail comes off nicely off the back.
There again, many tollers have very low tail sets,
Yeah.
and that's
And it's usually carried down
and then that's it's denoting a fault there in the rear. Anyway, we'll go back. I just wanted to. We're going to the level top line.
Lower croup create the tail that hangs over the back.
Well, no, I think that's something we might deal with because I'm bringing you a dog to show that does carry that high tail, but that's only, when she's in real alert and high action.
There's a difference to having a dog with the tail coming nicely off and carried up like so, and a dog that's got a sloping croup and carrying like
Yeah.
that, hooking back
Yeah.
like a teapot handle.
And a lot of that depends on, because then it means that your croup is angled too steeply.
Too steep.
And
that
then
shows
your
a fine
tail's
movement
coming out.
and balance.
And then that you can quite often be the dogs that are high in the rear too. Okay, level top line, more or less, but with a slight rise over the loin. Now, people say to me, how can you tell strong, medium bone? I mean, you really can. You can. If it's overly heavy, the dog is going to look too heavy and cloddy. If it's too fine, you're going to have quite often what I call hairy whippets with very, very fine bone and don't really look like they could bring in a goose to save their life. They might be able to. Avery Nicholson said he didn't care how big the dog was or whether it carried a duck in or a goose in. If they had the heart to do it and drag it up the beach, he didn't care. So that anyway, strong medium bone, and it's generally slightly oval. It's not real round bone, it's slightly oval. Deep in the chest. Way too many tollers have shallow chests. Some of them drop with age, but there are a number that don't have enough. That chest has to hold your heart and your lungs, and they have to have room to work. You need that deep chest.
Can I just point out something? How important the underline is as well.
Well, yes,
balance
you
with the
can.
top
Yes,
line.
thank you, Denise. Yeah, with not too much tuck up.
Absolutely, but it's very important to have a good flow in the shoulder, down through the top line, which is almost level, and a nice smooth underline. If it comes up like so, then you're going to have problems in that rear assembly. It's going to be untypical of a toller.
And that would denote to me to a fairly strong loin when it's deep like that. Now, the long bushy tail we've dealt with, the Tola's crowning glory. And I mean, if you see a Tola in action, that tail lashing back and forth, and this is one of the things that attracts a duck's attention. So if you've got a skinny little tail, it's at least not good Tola type. Tail is very important. Now, I haven't been asking for questions along the way. We'll get to that in a minute, and people are asking anyway, for which I'm happy. Yep. Okay. Now we have to remember that this is the smallest of all the retrievers, but quite honestly, I'm seeing so many that are just way too tiny, and others who are too big. But the standard calls for a male of 19 to 20 inches, or for our European visitors, 48 to 51 centimeters. Now, my own personal ideal is smack dab halfway through that, about 19 and a half inches. But we're not going to quibble over half an inch. The American standard now says 19 inches. Because they told me that they were not allowed to put in half an inch. And so they decided to go for the smaller size because they were afraid people would breed them too big. Well, what's happening is they're breeding them too small. But
Do you still have an inch under or over?
yeah, we do have an inch under and over.
Allowed.
I didn't put that in because I was trying to keep this type short. Here. The females, 45 to 48 centimeters or 18 to 19 inches. Now, I happen to like a slightly smaller bitch, but that's, I would say but that's only my ideal. If you wanted to use my same logic here, you'd have to say that 18 and a half inches would be your ideal bitch size. But, so that's that. Now, I've just put this in so you can get a sort of idea of some size comparison. This was more for judges who were familiar with Goldens and not so familiar with Tolas. Approximate kind of comparison there. And these, as you see, were from the late Robert Cole's things that he did, You Be the Judge. Okay, Mary Ellen? And I've just got a couple of pictures here, good comparison between a nice golden head and a nice Tola head. Tolas and Labradors in Norway. And now we get to heads. Now, the standard says that the head is wedge-shaped. Now, you want a wedge like that. You do not want a narrow wedge coming to a very snipey pointed muzzle, because this dog has to pick up a bird, a good-sized bird. But you do want that wedge shape, and looking at it from above, it's also wedge shape. You don't want a very rounded, domy skull. You want a fairly flat skull. Both of these dogs have flat skulls. They have different ear sets, but both of these are good heads with strong muzzles, strong underjaw, so that which denotes a good bite, and is a good. These are both good mouths for picking up birds and holding them and carrying them. They also have nice Tola type, good ear sets. The bitch on the right, the ears are just a tad long for the size of head, but I don't have a problem with that. Do you, Denise?
No, I don't, because she's a very strong head.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd like to impress upon people when looking at heads, firstly, it should be a good blunt wedge, not a tight wedge, as Alison says, not like cutting a wedge of cheese. It should be blunt. But the depth of the foreface is extremely important, because that's where the jaw is going to carry the bird.
And that's what I mean by having a strong underjaw.
So you need to look at a head which is clean and well filled in under the eye, not pinched in any way. A good breadth of underjaw, very important, because we're finding narrow underjaws and losing teeth because of it. So the bites are changing. We're also finding foreshortened muzzles to the point where a puppy's mouth will go out and go in and go out and go in, and you're sort of kicking your finger.